All right, everyone, welcome along. Week 7 in our big New York City water tower review. What I wanted to look at today was something that happens a lot, especially when we start out with our data. Or to be fair, I've seen it happen enough times, and even with where you've got a proper database as opposed to using Excel. But Excel is often where it starts. And it's one of those things that you kind of need to really get your head around as we get to do more with Power BI. And it's that idea that you need to make your data sets, so your tables, narrower. Here we are, PowerPoint. Everyone's favorite ingredient, isn't it? So let's have a look at this, yeah? What happens when you're just getting far too many columns that your data set starts to slow down? So lots of columns, what do we need to do with them? So the example that we've got in our New York water towers is really, it's all the inspection fields that we've got. So that, well, let's actually have a look at the form that people fill out online and say, oh, I've done my inspection. Okay? Fill that out, and we can take it from there and see if we can understand a little bit more about it. Okay? So we've got these ideas that you've got a general inspection item. So was the inspection performed? So it's requirement, was the requirement met in terms of we inspected it, yes or no? And then we've got the results of those as well. So it wasn't satisfactory, nothing unsatisfactory was found, or corrective action was required. Nothing unsatisfactory found, corrective action required. Okay, so we've kind of got those two items that work both for the general inspections but also for the sanitary inspections. So you've got sanitary inspection requirements. And then lastly, and this is the bit that's a bit different to it all, we've got this idea of the water quality. Right? So a sample of water is taken and it's sent off to a lab, and the lab comes back and says, well, yeah, you can drink it. Right? Or they go, might be an issue here. Right? So we need to kind of be able to report on that, because it would be nice to be able to see, are there hotspots, are there issues, are there other things like that? And that's one of those areas that we've looked at, isn't it? So let's cut on over into Power BI and see what I've done and see if we can follow through with how that's been built and if that makes sense at all. All right, so here we are, Power BI desktop, right? Our data model that we've got. So if you remember, if we scroll right over here, I'll show you one of the things I've added just so that this works, right? I've put in an index for it, okay? So it just goes an inspection ID, it's been added in as an index just to count down and say, right, how many rows have we got in the database, right? So we had the inspection base here. Okay, we've got rid of that now. And we're now using, and I've mapped everything to use, inspection index. Okay, here, right? Index to something I was looking at, trying to work something out when I was trying to do all the validations. So how do I fix this? What do I need to do? So step number 1 is I need to work out what all my testing is and what the format is that's used for it. So what I've done is I've used something quite simple for it. Okay, and I've done it as 2 steps just because you might find that's easier for you depending on your use case. Although very much so, I could have done this all in Power BI and not brought in the intermediary of Excel. But we've brought in the intermediary of Excel just because I think for a lot of use cases, you may find that makes more sense, but you may find, Ross, you're an idiot. That's not right at all. So what have we done? We've started with our big index table that we've talked about. So our inspections data plus the index column for it. Okay. Indexes, you can clearly see, are completely arbitrary here for it. They're not going to exist anywhere else but in my data table. Okay. If we then, my mouse is disappearing. All right, so my mouse, just forget it. Mouse isn't going to work. Picks its moments, doesn't it? All right. So we've started here, haven't we? So we've got with the basics of it. What we've done then is we've removed the other columns that we don't need. So all the stuff like tank number, inspection number, not the inspection ID that we've added, but the number, the dates, all that sort of stuff, We've just got rid of it. Okay. And then what we've done is we've used this unpivot concept. So we've unpivoted it around the inspection ID. So what that means is if we look at this first one here, under inspection ID 1, you can see we've got a row for each of what was the columns. Okay. And we've then got a value for it. All I'm going to do at this point, okay, is I'm going to keep the attributes. So we're going to remove all the other columns, keep the attributes, and let's just get the distinct list. Okay, so I just want to know exactly what columns I've got, because at some point I'm going to have to match that up to make it work. Right? Now, in the interests of keeping this as simple, as easy as possible, what I've done is I've then copied and pasted that into an Excel spreadsheet. Okay? But you could build it all in Power BI if you wanted. So I'll show you what I've built here. So you can recognize that we've got the attribute to start with. Okay. Then I've labeled the category. So I've written a little function there, if blah, blah, blah. Right. So if it contains GI, it's general. If it's SI, it's sanitary. Otherwise, it's quality. The exception being inspection performed, which is just something different. So I thought, right, that works. That gives us, is it a general one or sanitary or inspection? You know, kind of what is it? Okay, done something similar with the results. Okay, and at that point, I've then copied and pasted it back into Power BI. You can see, right, well, you could probably have done that with some conditional rules. Of course I could. Okay, what I wanted you to figure out and recognize is you can do something similar within Excel. This is not uncommon that you're going to have something, well, I need to bring something else into it. So you might have, say, a list of countries that you've got in your database or in your reporting. And you could say, well, we want to bring that in and bring in, these are our sales areas for those countries, which might be completely random. Well, not random, but, you know, not as arbitrary as continent, for example. You might have something else. So you can do this where you drop it into Excel, you do something, and then you bring it back through. So the bring it back through bit looks like this. So we've got here, where we've got the inspections, and what I've got is I've got a testing here, right? And it starts with the source. And as you can see, the source is just it copied and pasted it. Right? The only difference is I changed the titles, okay, of the columns, okay? But you can see, so we've got that. I'm going to change some types, rename some columns because this wants to be type and subtype or something like that. I might change those depending on how it looks, right? Added an index to it because we're going to map this to the results and we don't want to be storing the big text values in each one. We kind of want a key. So I've added an index to that, call it test attribute ID. You could change it in the index column here. If you just renamed index, just overtyped that was something different, it would work. But I thought, I want you to see if that happens, you can rename the column, no problem. Change some types to make sure that's a number. And then I've put in this conditional column. So we've got R for red. So red is basically, there's issues with it. So we've kind of got green and red. So we don't have an amber status in terms of these. They're kind of all binary, if you remember back from our PowerPoint. So what I've done is I've just written this. And again, it's very simple, just drop it in. So we've gone through the two exceptional ones. So the water quality, this NTS certified. So New York, something, something certified. The water is drinkable and meet standards, which is to do with a test that's carried out. And then other than that, we've said it's either this P, A or N, yeah, there's things wrong. Everything else is kind of fine. So we can say, that's it. Otherwise, it's going to be null. Click OK. We've now got a list of these. What good's that, you're saying? Well, because what I can now do is I can replicate some of the work that we did previously. So if we go back to this results table that I've now got, we've got our index table to start with. We're going through, we're removing the columns we did before. We're going to unpivot it. And then we're going to merge in, unpivot, and then we can merge in that table that we've just built. And then if we keep 2 columns for this, just for this interim step, remember, so we've got the test attribute, which is the text for it, and we can add descriptions, we can do all sorts of things like that. Again, something you'd look to do in Excel probably if you were to put in lengthy descriptions about what it is. But we've also got the red state, so the failed state. So our next step, once we've got that, first we're going to remove the attribute yet because we don't need to the text anymore for it. And then we're going to add this conditional. So if it equals the red state, give it a value of 2, otherwise it's 1. So 2 is failed, 1 is success. You know, kind of, you could do what you want. Good, bad, RG, whatever. I'm going 1, 2. Okay. So now we've got that. What it means is at the end of that, when that loads, all those columns that we had previously, bear in mind there's 27 tests. So that's 27 columns. We've got rid of 27 columns and brought that to 4. Now you're going to say, well, yeah, but there's 27 times the row count, which yes, there is. But Power BI works better with rows, with multiple rows, than it does with multiple columns. So because it tries to compress, the compression algorithm is there. This will work much better for it. Okay, we've got compression algorithms, we've got testing attributes, we've got all the stuff that we need all pieced together here that's going to actually now enable this column to be quite quick to use and to test. And what we're going to be really looking at is, for this inspection, what was the result here? Is it red? Is it green? Okay, so what we end up with then is, I think, quite a nice little way of presenting stuff. Okay, and we'll still got some tweaks to do with this, but this works very quickly, very easily, and is very efficient because we've got a value, but we've also got like a number that we can use to present the color. So if we pick a location at random, okay, tell you what, what's this over here? I don't know, got no idea. Let's go to the drill through the location report so we can see over time actually what's happened here. And wow, picked a really bad one. Oops, right. Didn't mean to do that, but it's useful. We've got some good, we've got some bad. So we can see in 2020, there were issues with access for it. Okay, and I've chosen to use amber for these, for the general ones, because potentially they're not actually that bad. So we can see there was, in terms of getting access to the ladder, that's a bit of a problem. In terms of the internal structure, it potentially needed some repairs doing. And then obviously we've also got the access to the roof, and we can see we've got these A's. What we've more worryingly, we can see that actually when we got down to the water quality, we did have some issues. Okay, we're in there. Both those, they were suitable for, the water was deemed potable. Wonder what they are testing it for. But presence of bacteria, so E. coli and coliform bacteria. So maybe you wouldn't want to be drinking that. But straight away, we've got, wow, we can start to really get into and understand what is going on at any given time across our estate. Okay, really quick, really easy way of doing it. So if I hit edit, you can see in terms of what we've done is we've just dropped in the content from the results. Okay, if I shift myself over there, you can see we've dropped in from results the value, and then we're just letting it come back with the first value, and we've put in some conditional formatting on an icon, and we've got a choice there. So I've just used red and green for now, but again, if you're going to be more accessible and considerate of your audience, you probably wouldn't want to just use that. So what we'd probably look to do is to use like the green tick and the red cross, or you could put like them on the background. Okay, accessibility, it's important. We need to think about what it is that we want to do for people. So I can put a tick or a cross. Okay, click OK, and you can see that then presents that way. We can do the same for any of those and make that whole thing much more performant. So what do you reckon then? Okay, putting it in a format that works and actually being able to pull everything together so that you can then serve up a report pack that's simple. And again, the vision that I've got is I want to have that kind of a sheet that they could kind of print off and say, our building's great, right? I'm pretty sure from reading all the guidance on the New York water tower inspections, there's a sheet similar to like the scores on the doors in the UK, or that we ask restaurants to put up to say, oh, you've passed your food hygiene standards, you're great, you're not so great. I think there's something similar, but I would, let's push this to the next level. Let's give them a certificate they could kind of print out and say, look, here's what we did. Okay. But that all comes from thinking through where do we need to get the data. But the way that's led us is from having that out as one multi-column thing that's just compressible. And by making it compressed, we actually get a much more performant data model because it allows you to leverage Power BI's effectively context. So you're using filter context to effectively come back and say, right, this is the value that you're going to get for here. I'm not having to write DAX, I'm not having to do lots of complicated things. And we're also demonstrating one of the things that Patrick likes to talk about in terms of push it back into your ETL scripting as much as you can. So we've pushed back the whole calculation of the KPI. So was this result good or bad? The net impact of that is I haven't had to write DAX to determine is this a good result or a bad result. Without that, I would actually have to write, in the event of this, is this good? And one for each column, okay? And then because the columns are different, some of them be like, I don't know. So this has collapsed all that right down so I can now understand what do I need to put in for each value. It's as simple, there's a KPI to say this is this, and we look at the value, which is what's actually written in the form or what's appearing on the website, and that we know the status of that because we've flagged out where it's red, so where we've got a problem. That's what we've used our conditional formatting for. If there's no problem, it's good, okay? And that works. So it was quick, it was easy, it's pulled it through, and it will also have compressed the model a lot more than having another 27 columns. So let me know what you think down below. So I hope you'll stay with us because we're going to keep going through. We're going to do more with this and expand on it as we get further down over the next coming weeks. So stay safe, take care, ta-da.